Hey YouTube, today I'm going to be talking about how you can determine through money the future of your country where you live so that you can be better prepared. Over a decade ago, I wrote the book Bank to the Future, Protect Your Future Before Governments Go Bust, which tried to help people understand how the nature of our monetary system dictates the way economies are organized and the inevitable consequence. And it ended with some forecasts of where things would go based upon whether the country reforms the way that money is created or doesn't. And so today I'd like to share with you some thoughts and a quick video on how you can determine where your country is and how you can then make some decisions about what's more important to you. So firstly, the word communism has a bit of a boogie monster attached to it. It is used by free markets, and capitalist economies to create this, evil boogie monster. And the reason for that is because there's several negative consequences from communism. But in its ideal, when I was doing my master's in economics and undergrad, you're taught about these different ideals, and communism is based upon a principle of equality for all. And a sense of fairness is what it's designed. And in its simplest forms, without getting too geeky, it means that you remove the ability for people to own things, you remove private ownership, and you have a central authority, like in example, the China Communist Party, which is responsible for sharing and driving equality. Now, give the example of China. China is not a pure communist country. It is run by the China Communist Party, but it also has taken advantage of a hybrid model with using capitalism for global exports, and also it has pockets of capitalism through special regions like Hong Kong and Taiwan that are involved in lots of politics right now as they become more integrated into a less capitalist and more communist way of organizing an economy. However, there are success stories for this as well. China took its very poor class and made them one of the most successful middle classes in the world, and then used capitalism in order to make it the second largest economy in the world and soon to be the largest economy in the world. So like it or hate it, it has a success story in the incredible growth and change that has happened in China. The downside is that if you look at happiness indexes, communism tends to produce less freedom and therefore less happiness across its society. And therefore, inevitably, you end up with revolutions, breakdowns, and a switch to other ways of organizing an economy. Then you have on the other extreme pure capitalism. Capitalism, we're taught in economics, is this classical economics concept where you have this invisible hand, if you read The Wealth of Nations by Adam Smith, whereby by giving people the pursuit to wealth and riches, they utility maximize, as it were, and therefore they go out and it unlocks innovation where people create things based upon the pursuit of money, and then competition comes along and figures out a way of doing something better, and then it drives prices down and creates an effective market until you inject regulations and laws which then slow down, and you create monopolies where one company might, through some kind of regulation and law, have all the power, and therefore they start exercising unnecessary, manipulation based upon their power and control. And therefore you need to reduce regulations in order to drive competition. And if one company is treating their customers very badly, another company comes along and does it very well. And you have these two extremes. And then you have a hybrid in the model, which is socialism, which is where capitalism recognizes certain market failures. It may not have a good way of upholding the law, defending the country, building the roads that nobody wants to build, and yet it has public utility, and therefore, and also the creation of legal tender and money and various other things need a government, and then a government decides whether they want to. For example, in America, they had a constitution. The constitution was designed to protect the people from the government getting too big, and then they amend it and amend it and amend it over time, which leads to a bigger and bigger and bigger government. And therefore you have this socialist model, which is where you have a hybrid between capitalism and communism. Communism used for certain things, where you tax people and provide equally for all. And then capitalism, where the free market prevails in finding efficient solutions and innovations to all of many of the world's problems. And so these are just the extremes. Now, in the book, Bank to the Future, Protect Your Future Before Governments Go Bust, I talked about how money and whether a country reforms its money will determine whether they shift from free market capitalism to socialism to communism on the extreme, or whether a communist country shifts to socialism and to free market capitalism on its extreme. So now I believe that the technology exists, now that monetary reform is no longer just a politics and government conversation, but because we had a bottom-up movement and reform with Bitcoin, and then the technology that now leads to central bank digital currencies, technology is going to determine the future of your country. And so in the book, Bank to the Future, it was the first published book in the world to include Bitcoin. It was written over a decade ago, and it was designed to help people protect themselves when governments go bust. And the inevitable consequence is that at some stage, because money is debt and dollars and pounds and fiat currencies are the world's largest regulated Ponzi schemes, eventually it leads to over-indebtedness of both individuals, governments, and businesses and central banks, that you either repackage it into global organizations like the IMF and the World Bank and the Bank of International Settlements, or you implement a banking reform in your country in a deleveraging event. I believe that deleveraging event will be allowing banks to go bust, which is all money is created as debt, and replacing that money with a central bank digital currency that's not backed on debt. The central bank digital currency is what I call a communistic force, because it will have artificial intelligence built into it. It will have ways of organizing a monetary system built into it, like adjusting negative interest rates, integration with government policies and fiscal policies, for example, shutting off the wallet if you have a compulsory vaccine, for example, of those that haven't implemented the vaccine, so that your financial future is tied to government policy, and so therefore it shifts you to a communist state. So the countries that are implementing the central bank digital currencies are going to be a slow transition, depending on where they're starting from free market capitalism to socialism, where currency is not created by a private banker's debt, but it's created as either modern monetary theory, where you have an integration between the government, treasury, and the central bank, and therefore it's used as a mechanism to deleverage, unwind the debt, but without collapsing the economy, because you're not changing the money supply, you're just taking out all the debt and interest. And therefore it becomes like a peer-to-peer system, but it will have full control, full censorship. It will be money that you can only own if the government gives you permission and you're doing everything how they want. You can only spend it when you're spending it in the way they want you to spend it, and it can algorithmically incentivize spending by giving you negative interest rates, or incentivize saving by increasing those interest rates, all algorithmically based upon what the central banks put into the program. And also obviously supply, is still at the whims of the central banks or the robot that's running the central bank. And so it's a transition over to communism. And so therefore, and then you've got the opposite extreme, which is Bitcoin, which is money that you can own, money that you can spend with no censorship and with no bank and with no government, and money whose supply is completely fixed and will never change. And therefore you have these two extremes. One is a free market extreme, This is the free market invisible hand behind Bitcoin, which is eating up individuals, companies and countries at the moment in terms of onboarding. And then you have the exact opposite in central bank digital currencies. So here's the litmus test. Here's my forecast on how to determine where your country is and where it's headed so that you can make a decision based upon that. So firstly, you may be completely happy living in communism. If you value security and equality over freedom, then you may be more happy. And there are many people that were taken out of poverty and into middle class in China that are very happy with the China Communist Party. If you value freedom over security and equality, then you may be more happy in a free market. And there are many people that think that capitalism is the root of all evil, and the system shafts and only rewards those that are a pursuit of money. They value freedom less, and they believe that the government needs to intervene to tax the rich and distribute to the poor and add more equality. The only challenge with those ways of organizing a system is inevitably you end up with equality for the people, but vast wealth and capitalism for the dictators and those most connected to the communist parties. And so it's one for one. You know that a government really believes in communism when communism also applies to them. If they are also at the exact same wealth and ownership of private property as all of the people, then I could take that as a communist leader that really believes in communism. If, however, there's one rule for them and a rule for all the people, then they don't really believe in it, and I think it's a power play which inevitably leads to a revolution and a complete change in the system at certain key events. And so because communism is then implemented to try and stop those revolutions, you end up with populations that value freedom, and therefore when they don't get freedom, it decreases the happiness index in those countries. So the challenge is when you have that hybrid model. So the hybrid model is the socialist model, which is where communism is used in order to create crony capitalism. So at the moment, because the monetary system is created as debt every time someone issues a loan, you end up with regulations that allow that to happen, and therefore you end up with the government's currency being used as a multiplier in the bank that creates money as debt, which pumps up real estate, and central banks use your mortgage-backed securities in order to push up the price of assets, and then you have ginormous wealth inequality, which is where we have in most socialist states. You have an ever-increasing wealth inequality. Those of the free markets start to blame communist policies and government, and those that are on the other side of the wealth inequality start to blame capitalism, saying that the system shafted us, I'm deep in debt, and it's because they never got on the right side of the asset price pumps that happen from a socialist hybrid model. Now, the world inevitably has a yin and a yang, and there's shades of grey, and that's what you see. But now we're starting to see this. So how do you forecast where your country's going? Well, I believe that Bitcoin, the countries that adopt Bitcoin at the fastest rate are going to be the freest forms of markets. The countries that adopt central bank digital currencies at the fastest rate are on a path to eventual communism. And the ones that have a hybrid model that allow for their own central bank digital currency and Bitcoin, and don't make Bitcoin illegal, and have a draconian policy on those that use Bitcoin, will be headed for the hybrid model in socialism. So, are you more happy in a socialist, free market, or communist-led economy? Then you may want to make some decisions. And I understand where you live is a lifestyle thing, it's not just that, but don't be surprised when it happens. So here's the litmus test. If your country is pursuing central bank digital currencies and trying to make Bitcoin illegal, China being the biggest example at the moment, then you better be happy with communism and value freedom less than security and equality. If you are in a country that doesn't even have its own currency or central bank digital currency, that is dependent upon Bitcoin and the dollar, i.e. El Salvador, then you are seeing a country shift from communism to socialism to capitalism. And so El Salvador is the only country in the world that's doing that right now. So if you believe in freedom, if you believe in, you want to live in an economy that has free market, sound money at its core, then El Salvador is the only social economic experiment. But I believe that many other countries will follow and watch. And so a country that does not have a central bank digital currency and uses Bitcoin as digital hard sound money in order to produce financial innovation under legal tender and financial products like bonds, like El Salvador is experimenting with right now, then that is moving to one of the freest markets, and it would be, then you have the hybrid models. The countries that are allowing Bitcoin to persist by not making it illegal or banning it, but are pushing central bank digital currencies. This, I believe, is the path of America, is the degree at which they allow Bitcoin to persist relative to central bank digital currencies. So you could look at the Bitcoin market cap to central bank digital currency market cap ratio to see how communist or how capitalist that country is. The higher the number of the Bitcoin ratio market cap to the central bank digital currency market cap will be a more free market, but using socialism to plug in market failures. The higher the market cap of the central bank digital currency relative to the market cap of Bitcoin will be the more communist that country is headed to. So this is my little thoughts on capitalist, communist, socialist indexes. And I think it would be a really interesting thing for a researcher or an academic to see how this theory works out. But there you are, there's a little litmus test for you to determine where is my country headed, and do I value freedom or security more? And those are the decisions that you need to make, and then you can try and make decisions. Some people unfortunately just won't have those decisions. They're stuck with their government, and therefore they're risking their lives at the moment and trying to flee those countries because they don't have the freedom to choose. And so really the life work, I think, of Bitcoin is that if it gives people the freedom to choose, then I've always seen Bitcoin as a freedom. Bitcoin is freedom to me. Money you can own, money you can spend, and money who has a fixed supply, free from central banks, governments, and the vast majority of the world still think it's a Ponzi scheme, a get-rich-quick scheme, a scam, or a currency just for drug dealers, which creates the opportunity for those that get on board faster and the countries that get on board faster. And so really, I think we're now getting to see, last year I released a video series on the Great Depression of the 2020s and how it would lead to a monetary renegotiation and currency wars. Well, every country is setting them up for those currency wars, and thanks to Bitcoin, it gave an opportunity for David to beat Goliath. El Salvador is the first one to make it legal tender and build financial innovation on top of it. And the Bitcoin community, Bank to the Future, and all of us will look forward to supporting this social economic experiment of proving that David can beat Goliath. So there's a few thoughts for you. Let me know in the comments section where you think your country is headed. Let me know where you are, whether you think it's headed for communism, whether you think it's headed for capitalism, or whether you think it's going to be socialism in the middle, and share some of your things that you're seeing in your country around Bitcoin and around central bank digital currencies. Always remember, you are alive at one of the most interesting and exciting times in financial history. Subscribe to my channel. I'll make sure you're on the right side of that change with thoughts each day just after my workout. And make sure some people are going to get hurt, others are going to do really well. I want to make sure that you're on the right side of that change. Peace, love, unity. I'm off for the day. Peace.